Creation and Completion, the chapter on essential points for approaching the path, gaining certainty. The first point is that in order to practice Dharma, you need to be certain about its validity. Cultivating that certainty has to be done in 3 steps. Cultivating the wisdom or knowledge of hearing, cultivating the wisdom of thinking about what has been heard, and then finally cultivating the wisdom that comes from meditation. It is pointed out that people of the highest faculties, which means extremely rare and highly gifted individuals, do not necessarily need to go through the preliminary stages of hearing and thinking about the Dharma. An example of this type of person is King Indrabhuti of Udiyana, who received instructions from the Buddha and was liberated on the spot. Most of us, however, need first to hear instruction, then to think about it very carefully, and only thereafter to implement it in meditation practice. Why do we have to begin by hearing the Dharma? Because Dharma practice is not primarily concerned with or limited to the experience of this life. Therefore, it is sufficiently different from what we are used to that before we have heard it explained. We really have no idea what it is, let alone how to go about practicing it. We therefore require instruction. What do we take as the sources of our instruction? What Dharma do we try to hear? Generally speaking, there are 2 classes of scripture or texts used in Buddha Dharma. One is called the Dictates of the Buddha, which means the teachings that the Buddha gave when he taught in India. The others are called the commentaries or shastras, which are commentaries on these teachings composed by the great masters of India and other countries. The custom in the Vajrayana tradition is to emphasize the study of the commentaries rather than the study of the Buddha's original teachings. Casually considering this, you might expect that we would emphasize the Buddha's teachings themselves in our study because, after all, is not the Buddha the most important teacher in the Buddhist tradition? Historically, some scholars have also objected, saying, why study the commentaries rather than the Buddha's original statements? The reason is that the Buddha's original statements are vast in extent and number. Furthermore, they are not necessarily organized for easy study or reference. They are organized on the basis of the occasions on which they were delivered. In addition, because these teachings given by the Buddha were made at the request of and for the needs of specific individuals in specific contexts, they represent different styles of teaching. The Buddha's teachings are principally classed as either provisional or definitive in meaning. Simply by studying these original texts themselves, it is impossible for a beginner to determine which statements are provisional and which are definitive. On the other hand, the commentaries distinguish clearly between provisional and definitive assessments of the Buddha. For easy reference, they example similar teachings or those that need to be used together. They explain the hidden meanings or subtleties of the Buddha's teachings. And they summarize especially long treatments of topics that can be understood with a brief explanation. In short, it is really through the commentaries that we approach the Buddha's teachings themselves. Within the commentaries on the Buddha's teachings, there are two main types. Some are elaborate explanations employing a great deal of logical reasoning that are intended as guides for acquiring tremendous knowledge of the teachings. The other commentaries do not have elaborate presentations of logical reasoning, but are fairly straightforward guides on how to practice the Buddha's teachings. These tend to include references to the Buddha's statements and also refer a great deal to the actual experiences discussed in those texts with practical instructions. It is principally this that we emphasize in our study. Within the general class of texts that give practical instructions, again, there are two varieties. Some of these texts are elaborate explanations of the methods of practice, and some are very brief, very pithy statements on the essence of practice. The latter tend to be in the form of songs and are referred in Sanskrit as doha. They are the most important type of texts to emphasize in your study because, given their form, they are easy to remember. Being easy to keep in mind, they are easy to use in actual practice. They combine the two virtues of profundity and brevity. Among the Indian dohas, we study those of the Indian Mahasiddhas such as Tilopa and Naropa. Among the Tibetan songs, we study those of the masters of the Kagyu lineage, especially those of Jetsun Milarepa. Whether you read them or heard them, they are the most important basis for study. Through hearing the Dharma, you come to a very basic idea or understanding of what it means. You come to think, things are like this. This is how things are. This understanding is the first level of prajna or knowledge. Knowledge that comes from hearing. But it is only the first level. In general, there are two kinds of practitioners. One kind is called a follower of faith, which means someone who basically believes what they are told simply because they have been told it. The other kind is a follower of Dharma, or someone who does not take anything on authority, no matter who was supposed to have said it, but tries to discern why they said it, what it really means. Taking this second approach, looking for the real meaning of a statement, you go beyond the knowledge of hearing. Whether you study the Buddha's teachings or the commentaries upon them, the text of instruction or the dohas, you are concerned with the question, what does this really mean? What is this really trying to say to me? Why did the person who wrote or sang this express it in this way? Through that type of analysis, you generate much greater certainty and understanding than you would by simply taking the statement at face value. This greater certainty is called the knowledge, prajna, of thinking. If you meditate after having generated this knowledge of thinking, then your practice will go much better because you will actually know how to meditate. You will also understand why you are meditating, why it is beneficial, and why it will work, which will give you much more confidence to go on with the practice. It is principally for this reason that the practice of meditation needs to be preceded by the practice of hearing and thinking. Renunciation. The next topic our text deals with is the importance of renunciation. There are two vital things that you need at the very inception of your practice. One is trust in Dharma, in its validity. The other is renunciation, revulsion for samsara. In order to create this, in order to generate true certainty about Dharma and revulsion for samsara, it is necessary to begin by contemplating what are called the four thoughts that turn the mind, or the four reminders. They are the difficulty of acquiring the freedom and resources of a precious human life, death and impermanence, the results of actions, and the defects of samsara. The generation of this type of renunciation and certainty in the Dharma is what is called your mind going to the Dharma. Understanding what Dharma is. The next step in your practice is to come to an understanding of what Dharma is, an understanding of the topics of view, meditation, conduct, and fruition that make up Buddha Dharma. The root of all this, as the Buddha himself said, is taming the mind. The Buddha's 84,000 teachings are concerned with taming the 84,000 types of mental afflictions, or kleshas. Taming the mind means taming the kleshas, because your mind is sometimes very rough, very wild, full of selfishness, afflicted by all kinds of coarse and negative thoughts. Whether or not we succeed in taming our minds, this taming is the topic with which all Dharma is concerned. Everything depends upon your mind. Any qualities that you attain through the path, you attain through your mind. Any defects that you remove through the path are removed from your mind. Therefore, what is called the recognition or realization of the view is taming your mind. What is called the cultivation of meditative absorption or meditation is taming your mind. You engage in certain modes of behavior of body and speech, conduct, in order to tame your mind. Taming is the fruition or result of your practice. If you understand this, then you understand that view, meditation, conduct, and fruition are all founded upon the mind. According to Buddha Dharma, a person consists of the three faculties of body, speech, and mind. How do we think about this? The body is composed of physical substances such as flesh and blood. What we regard as our body, from the top of the head to the tip of the toes, seems very powerful, very real. Speech seems less substantial. Speech consists of all of the positive and negative things that we say. But the root of all the deeds of body and speech is our mind. Now, if you were asked to say which of these three, body, speech, or mind, is primary, you might say the body, because the body seems the strongest, the most active or effective. Then you might say that speech is second, because speech, after all, can communicate. Nevertheless, it is not as strong or as stable as the body. And mind seems the weakest because it doesn't achieve anything except to think. However, in fact, mind is in charge of body and speech. Body and speech don't do anything at all without mind telling them to do it. So mind is the root. It is therefore said by the Siddhas of our tradition that your body and speech are like servants who perform the virtue and wrongdoing that the mind, like a boss, instigates. So of these three, mind is in fact the most powerful. Therefore, it is of the greatest importance that we take hold of our mind, that we fix our mind. Hence, all Buddhist practices including view, meditation, and conduct, are concerned with fixing or taming the mind. Taming or fixing the mind means abandoning the kileshas, the mental afflictions. Everyone's mind has two aspects, one pure and the other impure. The impure aspect is called kileshas. If you abandon kileshas, then all of your actions of body and speech will automatically become dharmic or pure. As long as you have not abandoned them, then no matter how good your actions of body and speech may appear, you will still never be happy. Abandoning kileshas is the aim of Dharma. But for this to succeed, it is necessary that the remedy, which is the practice, actually encounter the kileshas. In order for this to occur, you need to take an honest look at your own mind. You need to see which kilesha is your biggest problem. For some people, it is anger. For others, it is jealousy or attachment or bewilderment or pride. It can be any of the 5 main kileshas, which are usually called the 5 poisons. When you have discovered which kilesha is the strongest, you dedicate your practice to its amelioration. For example, if you are meditating on the 4 reminders, such as the difficulty of acquiring a precious human existence, you think, I am doing the meditation in order to abandon such and such kileshas. Or if you are practicing the uncommon preliminaries, such as the refuge and bodhicitta practice, the vajrasattva practice, mandala practice, or guru yoga, then you think, I'm doing this in order to tame this kilesha that afflicts my mind. This is especially effective in the vajrasattva practice, wherein you can visualize the ambrosia coming from his heart and entering the top of your head to purify you and think, such and such kilesha is being purified. Thus, by specifically directing the intention of your practice to your biggest problem, the Dharma becomes an effective remedy for your kileshas, and your kileshas will weaken over time. Some people do not have any particularly dominant kilesha and are not particularly involved with anything overtly unvirtuous. They are more afflicted by a basic fundamental fixation on their own existence. Or they might be afflicted by doubt and hesitation. They might always wonder whether such and such is like this or like that. Or they might be afflicted by meaningless regret, constantly questioning their own actions. Or they might be mostly afflicted by a state of neutral sleepiness, or simply by the presence of a great many thoughts that aren't particularly kileshas or negative in themselves. If any of this is your principal problem, then direct your practice to that. Dedicate all of your practice, whether it is the visualization of deities, the recitation of mantras, or the practice of meditation, to the eradication of that problem. Directing your practice in this focused way will weaken and eventually eradicate the problem.